Senator Dennis.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. It is indeed a pleasure to stand in this august house to deliver my main contribution on behalf of the government of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. And as a citizen of Trinidad and Tobago, I am also a Tobagonian, and therefore I am happy to join 5 other Tobagonians in this house. Of course, Senator Dr. Dillon Remy, who was my pediatrician as a child.
Why you do that? Why you do Dr. Remy? Why you do that, sir?
Senator Julian John, while I do not approve of her company at this time, she's also a Tobagonian. You yourself, Mr. President, a distinguished Tobagonian, and I want to take the opportunity speaking in this Senate for the first time to congratulate you on your ascension to the position of President of the Senate. My brother, Lawrence Hislop, he's also here, and the Honorable Minister, Senator Hassel Bacchus. So it's a good time for Tobago. The Senate comprises approximately 20%, if my maths is correct, Tobagonians. And I want to give the Minister the assurance, the Minister of Finance the assurance, that it does not mean we'll be asking for 20% of the national budget in the future. But Mr. President, so much has been said thus far in this debate. So much has been said by us on the government side, and a lot has been said by those on the other side. And I have to be careful when I refer to those on the other side, because on the other side you have at the back the independent senators who have brought so far a lot of relevance and sensible contributions to this debate. But in front of them you have the opposition. And sometimes I'm not sure if they should be referred to as an opposition, because based on my assessment on what they have done for the last 10 years, they have been nothing but an obstruction to the progress of Trinidad and Tobago. So permit me from time to time to refer to them as an obstruction. And of course, I'll respond to that. And of course, their main topic this morning, instead of focusing on the budget, they are asking us in the PNM, who is our leader? And I want to say to them that we know clearly who is our leader. We know who is our Prime Minister. We know who is the political leader of the PNM, Dr. Keith Christopher Rowley is his name. But more important than knowing who is your leader, Mr. President, you also have to know the attributes of your leader. And I want to say to them that our leader is a man of integrity, a man of character, a man with an impeccable track record in the politics of Trinidad and Tobago. From 1986, I believe it was, before I was born, to now, a man who has demonstrated courage in his leadership of this country. And of course, a man who has been sober at all times, Mr. President. So they should not engage us at all in a conversation on leadership, Mr. President, because we understand what is leadership on this side, Mr. President. So the Senator Wade Mark, and he's absent at this time, but he spoke about some article about bacchanal in the PNM, and I want to give the population the assurance there is no bacchanal in the PNM, and there is no There is no bacchanal in the government of Trinidad and Tobago. And you see, they should be very familiar with bacchanal, because I can recall during the period 2010 to 2015, there was a People's Partnership government. And in that partnership, we had traitorship, we had dictatorship, we had everything else except leadership, Mr. President. And of course, the actions had no relationship to the development and progress of the people of Trinidad and Tobago, Mr. President. So there is no bacchanal on this side. There is no bacchanal in the PNM. Because, of course, at one point in time, the famous Jack was on the attack, attacking the then Prime Minister, who is their leader in the opposition at the time. And then recently we heard the same Jack was back. Of course, we have had scandal after scandal during that period, 2010 to 2015. The famous live sport man is here. We have had all kinds of scandals, all kinds of bacchanal during their time in government. But they're coming to tell us about bacchanal, Mr. President. There is no bacchanal on this side. So, when it comes to Tobago, I want to talk to the people of Tobago first and foremost, because 40 minutes tend to fly by very quickly, Mr. President. And I want to say that the people of Tobago and the island of Tobago have benefited significantly under this PNM government over the last 9 to 10 years. Because I want to remind them that when they were in government, there were two significant developments in Tobago during their period 2010 to 2015. We had a new meteorological center constructed and a famous pumpkin house. That was all that was constructed, Mr. President, in Tobago during that period. And under the leadership of this Prime Minister, who is a Tobagonian, as we all know, under the leadership of this government, Tobago has been transformed through the contributions, the direct involvement, and the direct investment of the central government. And I'll mention a few of the projects, and I want to leave the biggest one for last. During their time, the PNM administration before them had on the table 2 police stations, Mr. President. They came in, they had other priorities, and guess what? They cancelled it. And I'm not surprised, because when you operate like how they operated, then you wouldn't be interested in advancing anything to do with police stations. So they canceled that. And when this PNM government came into office, we ensured that we found the available resources to construct those 2 police stations. And now we have a situation where we have a new police station in Shervan Road, Mr. President, yes, and a new one in Roxborough as well. And I want to say, next door to the police station in Roxborough, there is also a new fire station thanks to this PNM government. And not only that, the government partnered as well with the Tobago House of Assembly, the then Tobago House of Assembly, led by the PNM at the time. And we ensured that we brought to the people in Tobago East, through the involvement of the member for Tobago East, and of course other members of cabinet and members of the THE at the point in time, to ensure that a new hospital was constructed for the benefit of the people of Tobago East in Roxborough. And the independent Senator Dr. Remy highlighted some issues there. But I want to say that by the time the last THE administration left office, everything was in place to ensure that that hospital be put to 24-hour use, Mr. President. And therefore, the current THE administration has no excuse, because it has to do with priorities. They have been allocated this time around $2.599 billion. And when we compare the numbers from 2019, 2020, and 2021, the PNM THA got $6.7 billion for that 3-year period. 2022, 2023, 2024. This current THA administration has gotten so far $7.7 billion. So in other words, the PNM government at the central level treated this current THA administration better than the previous PNM administration. And with $1 billion more available to them, they have not prioritized the full operationalization of that hospital, Mr. President, and therefore they have to take full responsibility. But I also want to mention the new airport terminal building, because that is a significant development in the Tobago space, because the Minister of Tourism spoke a lot about airlift, and we in Tobago tend to depend a lot on the domestic air bridge, Mr. President, to bring people to Tobago, whether it be our domestic tourists and in some cases our international arrivals, Mr. President. Because unfortunately, we have gone from having 2 flights out of the UK to now 1 flight, because the current THA administration decided that they were going to send Virgin Atlantic packing. And therefore, this new airport, with a capacity of 3 million passengers annually, is expected to attract significant new airlift direct, Mr. President, to the island of Tobago. But you see, an airport by itself cannot do that. And that is why, as part of our developmental plans for Tobago, this central government had on the agenda a Sandals resort. And I want to tell the people of Tobago especially that we missed out on a great opportunity to accelerate our progress in the tourism sector. Because we saw what happened as soon as Tobago, well, a few Tobagonians said no, that they don't want it, supported by some operatives in the opposition, because of course their intention is to obstruct, and any opportunity to develop Trinidad and Tobago, any opportunity that this government will bring to the table to advance the people of Trinidad and Tobago, they believe they must obstruct it. Because as far as they are concerned, it is party first and people after. So anything to advance their political intent, anything to advance their political ambition, even if it means obstructing development, Mr. President, they are going to do it. So they did it with Sandals, and they had people like Watson Duke and the current Chief Secretary telling the developers to put Sandals on Carrera, and telling the developers that Tobagonians don't want Sandals, which was an absolute lie. So we missed that opportunity, and on truth, Mr. President, I withdraw the word lie. I saw the facial expression. So it was an untruth. And not too long after that, Sandals went to St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And within a month of that hotel opening, Mr. President, we saw a number of flights, new airlift. All of a sudden, St. Vincent's tourism product transformed significantly. JetBlue, United Airlines, American Airlines, British Airways, Virgin Atlantic, new flights coming to the destination. And had the people of Tobago been able to benefit from a Sandals and a Marriott, which is under construction, with the new airport and the marina that this government is promising, guess what? Our tourism sector, Mr. President, would have been significantly transformed. And I want to say to the people of Trinidad and Tobago that an advanced tourism sector in Tobago will benefit the overall country. Because Sandals by itself was going to create 2,000 new jobs in Tobago, Mr. President. Right? In addition to that, I am sure a hotel of that magnitude will consume dozens of, well not dozens, thousands of eggs per day, and thousands of vegetables and other produce. Who do you think, Mr. President, would have been in a position to produce what was required for the operations of that hotel. The people of Tobago, and if not the people of Tobago, people of Trinidad.
That's right. Agriculture.
So agriculture would have benefited significantly. Another ridiculous claim made by people in the opposition was that when sandals come, it will kill off all the other small hotels and guest houses. Ridiculous. Because Sandals, of course, provides 5-star accommodation. And when Sandals attracts new airlift, let's say a plane signs an agreement with Sandals, a new airline signs an agreement with Sandals, and a plane comes with 200 people to Tobago. You think all of them going to Sandals, Mr. President? What Sandals would have brought was the linkages between Tobago and other international destinations, our source markets in Europe, in the United Kingdom, in North America and South America as well. But we shelved that. And you know what we have in Tobago now, Mr. President? You know what is the big investment in Tobago, apart from the Marriott that the central government brought? Double palm. Tobago now has a double palm, Mr. President. So the contributions of this central government to the people of Tobago has been significant, Mr. President. And there are other things that I could mention. The Hillsborough Dam, $60-odd million spent to ensure that it was desilted to increase the water capacity. A number of other projects done by WASA to improve the water capacity in Tobago, Mr. President, and all of this was geared towards ensuring that Tobago was well poised to be more competitive in the tourism sector, Mr. President. But certain people in Tobago did not want it. So they also want to talk about crime, Mr. President. And I heard Senator Jerlene John, she had a lot to say about crime. And I want to say to the people of Trinidad and Tobago that we have had a crime problem for a long time now. Even the period 2010 to 2015, we had a crime problem. I don't know if you recall during that period, the entire nation was shaken by the assassination of a prominent attorney during that period, Mr. President. So I'm not going to have a debate about who had more crime and who had more murders. That is not the debate we want to have. The debate we should be having on crime is that it is the responsibility of all of us to ensure that we do what is required to make Trinidad and Tobago a safer place. And what is their record? Because legislation brought to the Parliament to treat with the bail arrangements, because you recognize that sometimes the police will detect crime, arrest people, take them before the court, and in a short period of time, they're back out in the streets committing the same crimes. We brought legislation to treat with that. Guess what they did in the opposition? They did not support it. Legislation to protect whistleblowers. They did not support that, Mr. President. Anti-gang legislation, they did not support that, Mr. President, but it come in to talk about crime, because you see, crime for them is about political benefit. Crime for them is a campaign platform topic. True. They are not serious about treating with the issue of crime, Mr. President. And I want to address decent, right-thinking UNC supporters, because I believe that within that party, there are some decent people who support them. And I want to encourage them to rescue their party from the rot and the morass that it is in. Because come 2026 for the next general election, I want that when you end up back in opposition, at least on that occasion, you will be a credible, respectable and competent opposition that will support the next PNM government. Because it cannot be that the government, and this applies all over the world, Mr. President. I've seen even in the United States Congress, because of bipartisan political interests, have frustrated and obstructed even the President of the United States from advancing the important agenda of the people of the United States of America. The same thing is happening here in Trinidad and Tobago. So I'm saying, rescue that party from the leadership of the member for Siparia. Rescue that party from the people who are in the parliament and on bail.
Let's stay
Because it is foolish of us, Mr. President, I'm hoping that word is parliamentary, to expect that people who are unethical in their ways, nefarious in their operations, and a cartel by nature to be serious about solving crimes. UNC, that is what UNC means, Mr. President. So that is the debate we must have on crime. The opposition must be prepared to support critical legislation that will assist the government and other state agencies in fighting crime, not to come here and read out crime statistics as if under the UNC there was no crime. There was crime in 2010 to 2015, even in the cabinet, Mr. President. People were arrested. As we speak, you talk about that person, but what was the action taken by the PNM and its leadership, right? On the other hand, you have people sitting in the parliament and on bail, $1 million bail for serious offenses. That is the debate we should be having when it comes to crime, Mr. President. But of course, leadership is about courage, because there are some, and I want to read an article. I didn't come to read, but I will read this. I'll refer to this article, Mr. President, because there are some in this place and in this country that are very hypocritical. So we are in a situation where Trinidad and Tobago and its economy, like every other country in the world, is influenced by global forces. And therefore, the government has to take particular actions. So the Minister of Finance brought a budget, a very contextual one, applicable to our circumstances, because when things happen globally, whether it be wars, whether it be recessions, whatever might be taking place globally, it impacts on us, Mr. President, and that is obvious. So particular actions were prescribed. Number one, the government decided that we will implement, not introduce it, implement the property tax to ensure that we can attract an additional $1 billion in revenue specific to local government. They are talking now about axing the tax. And I want to read a little bit of this article, dated Thursday, the 1st of August, Newsday, Mr. President, 2013. I want to read a little bit that will remind the population of how these people operate. Speaking with reporters following the presentation of the report, Hawaii said government is looking at all the subsidies right now to see where it will make sense to start shifting what we do. Explaining the country's overall fiscal situation is better than anticipated, Hawaii said there was no need for dramatic changes, but there should be recalibrating of the process of subsidies for the country. And of course, he was speaking about the fuel subsidy, Mr. President. Noting that general elections are constitutionally due in 2015 and local government elections are due later this year, Hawaii observed. that will always be a real challenge because, to be frank, you're going into an election, it is unlikely that you will want to make very dramatic shifts. That is how they operate, Mr. President. This government, we are prepared to make the necessary decisions that will keep this country on an even keel in election season, out of election season, because we believe in doing the right thing for this country, because it is the right thing to do. So they were discussing fuel subsidies. As a matter of fact, at one point in time, they were prepared to introduce the property tax. Then it was called a land and buildings tax. They were prepared to introduce it. But of course, whenever an election comes, and because for them it's party first and country after, they prepare to pull back. And they want to talk about leadership, Mr. President. So in the budget, the Minister of Finance mentioned the current context, the current climate, global inflation at 5 to 6%, oil prices at a particular level, right? And the proposal is that we will have expenditure of $59 odd billion based on revenue of around $54 billion, a deficit of, let's say, $6 billion, Mr. President. The leader of the opposition, in her response, goodies after goodies, promises after promises. And you know what I did, Mr. President? I attached an estimated cost to these promises. And best case scenario, the cost of the promises advanced by the leader of the opposition in her response is going to be a minimum of $10 billion. Best case scenario, Mr. President. Could be more, but that is the best case scenario, $10 billion in promises, right? In addition to that, they're saying, axe the tax, right? If we axe the tax, we're going to lose $1 billion. They are saying as well, Mr. President, we should have kept Petrotrin open in the state that it was in, leaking $4 billion annually from the Treasury. So they're saying we should not have restructured Petrotrin into the competitive, profitable entity that it is now. We should not have restructured that. So that is 4 plus 1, $5 billion, Mr. President. Follow me. In addition to that, they are saying, Mr. President, that we should have retained the fuel subsidy. We should not have touched it. Although they were preparing to touch it back then, as a matter of fact, they increased premium fuel during their term in office. And they were preparing to withdraw the subsidies gradually, Mr. President. But of course, elections coming, and they are more concerned with winning election than to keeping Trinidad and Tobago progressive and moving forward. So they're saying now, no need to remove the fuel subsidy, which is, by the way, $3 to $4 billion a year. So that is how much? $9 billion. So they are saying to us, add the $10 billion in promises to that, that is $19 billion, plus the current deficit, which is $6 billion. They are saying that they could run this country at a deficit, Mr. President, of $25 billion. And my economist friend will tell me that that will be a deficit to GDP ratio of 12%. The healthy ratio, Mr. President, is 3% thereabout. That is what they are saying to us. So they will obstruct what the government is doing with respect to crime, with respect to tourism, because as far as they are concerned, once the government progresses and looks good, that is not good for them on election day. To hell with the country, Mr. President. It's all about elections for them and winning elections. But they don't understand that the people of Trinidad and Tobago are wise. And therefore we see through that. And that is why in 2015, Mr. President, notwithstanding all the promises that were thrown at them, they voted out the People's Partnership Government. And in 2020, Mr. President, in 2020, notwithstanding all that transpired with the pandemic and the difficulty that we were facing with our economy in Trinidad and Tobago and with the pandemic and all of that, they understood the quality of the leadership in the PNM and they voted for the PNM once again. Because, Mr. President, as that transpired with the people of Tobago, I come into that, sometimes it has been good house. And bad house does call you. Yes. So the people of Tobago, and thanks for bringing me to that point, the people of Tobago, for 21 years under the PNM, Mr. President, enjoyed development. They enjoyed an arrangement where Tobago's resources, whether it be $2 billion, $2.3 billion, what was given by the Ministry of Finance to the Tobago House of Assembly, we ensured it was spent in Tobago to the development of the people of Tobago. You know what is happening now, Mr. President? You know who is benefiting the most from the money given to the Tobago House of Assembly? It is their friends in the UNC, Mr. President. All the Tobagonian businesses and contractors, all of them have been blacklisted. And of course, the Senator Mark was in here talking about Warners and Landit and all kinds of foolishness. Talk about the Pumpkin House and the Pink Palace. Talk about Sicharan and Lala and all the other South Trinidad contractors in Tobago now, sidelining the Tobagonians. That is what is taking place in Tobago. Right? Over the last 3 years, Mr. President, in Tobago.
Okay. The crosstalk is getting a little bit high. That's making it difficult to hear Senator Dennis. Senator, continue.
Over the last 3 years in Tobago, Mr. President, some 2,000 Tobagonians who were employed in the construction sector have lost their jobs. You know why? Because the Tobagonian contractors who got contracts from the THA and who employed Tobagonians, all of them have been sidelined. Yep. We have a company now called California Stocko. In 1 year, Mr. President, in 1 year, $300 million almost in contracts. The entire development budget for the Tobago House of Assembly gifted away to one particular contractor. That is what is happening in Tobago, Mr. President. Their friends are enjoying it, and I understand why, and I will tell the people of Trinidad and Tobago why. Because you see, they believe, and if you notice, they are not a national party, Mr. President.
That's right. That's right.
They are a Trinidad party. The PNM is the only national Trinidad and Tobago party. So they will never put a candidate to run for Tobago East or Tobago West. But you know what they will do? They will meet with Farley and others quietly at night, and they will plan their strategies, and they will ensure that Tobago's resources that were originally withheld in Tobago and circulated in Tobago to the benefit of Tobagonians, they will plan and they will concoct and they will ensure those resources are no longer available to the people of Tobago, because they believe if they do that, they could empower and enrich their friends to ensure that they put themselves in a position to benefit, Mr. President. That is what is taking place in Tobago. Tobagonians were in good house under the PNM, and of course, bad house call them. And I want to warn the people of Trinidad and Tobago, because we run the risk of doing the same thing at the national level. We are in a good house. Yes, we have challenges.
Senator, you have 5 more minutes.
Yes, we have challenges, Mr. President. I will acknowledge that. We have challenges with crime. We have challenges economically. The oil prices fluctuate. That happens. It happened to them in 2015 in their last days of government. But I'm saying generally, we are in a good house, and I want us to remember the quality of leadership that we have in our Prime Minister, Dr. the Honorable Keith Christopher Rowley. And let us not Mr. President, take God out of our thoughts and fall for the ridiculous promises. One of the promises included bail amendment. That's what one of the promises included. But the same attempts made by this government to fix exactly that, they didn't support it, but they prepared to go and promise it. So you're not prepared to work with the government to give it, but you're promising the people of Trinidad and Tobago that when you get into office, you will fix those things. I'm saying to the people of Trinidad and Tobago, we're in a good house with challenges. Any good houses have challenges. Sometimes you have to dust the curtain. Sometimes you have to throw out the garbage. But we're in a good house. Don't let the bad house of the UNC call you, because you know what you have. You don't know what you're going to get. Well, let me change that. You know what you're going to get. Because we saw what they did in the period 2010 to 2015. We saw what they did in that period, Mr. President. So I'm saying to us, this budget is one that considers the global economic context within which we operate. We have prescribed policies, we have a manageable deficit, and we are going to make sensible decisions going forward in the best interests of the people of Trinidad and Tobago, Mr. President. That is what this government is about. So having said all of that, I want to congratulate the Minister of Finance for his stewardship of the economy of Trinidad and Tobago in very difficult circumstances. Because we inherited a treasury that was almost empty. Then we had the pandemic, Mr. President. And of course, following the pandemic, we have had serious global economic shocks, creating some challenges here for us. And I'm saying, notwithstanding all of that, no public servants were sent home. And we have managed the economy of Trinidad and Tobago in a way that ensured that we stayed the course. We stayed out of the hands of the IMF, unlike some of our neighbors, Mr. President. So with that said, congratulations to the Minister of Finance and congratulations to this government.
Honorable Senators, before I call on the next speaker, permit me to congratulate Senator Dennis on his maiden contribution in the Senate. Senator Lakshmi